Hello and welcome to another episode of Movies That Make Us. I'm Jake.
I'm Tracy.
And I'm Val.
And welcome to the show, everybody. We're all together again. It's been a couple of weeks since all three of us have been together on the show, so this will be fun. And that's good because this is a big episode that we're doing today. A big episode.
Oh, I see what you did there. Dun dun.
But first, before we get into the movie, how's everybody doing?
I mean, is it October? What month are we in? What
it is
year
October.
Is it?
It's still 2020. It's been the longest decade of my life. So, but yeah, we are still there in 2020.
A decade? You're lucky. I'm in a millennium here.
Yeah, I know. I hear you. I was watching
rewatching The Haunting of Hill House.
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
Well, you were excited because The Haunting of Bly Manor came out on Netflix, and I know that was something that you were excited about. And I guess that's tied in with The Haunting of Hill House. I know it's the same creators. I don't know if the story ties in or what.
Completely different stories, based on two different authors. So the original was I'm going to draw a blank. Lisa Jackson, and then the second one was I can't remember. He did Turning of the Screw. Is it James Joyce?
Well, you know me and my horror literature. I'm a big aficionado.
Well, and it's interesting because Bly Manor is much more of a gothic romance. It's not. It's kind of a ghost love story. It's not a horror film by any stretch, or series because it's 9 episodes. Haunting of Hill House is more intense, and it's more of a scarier ghost story, but it's also got a lot of gothic stuff. And I really like Mike Flanagan. He's a really good director, especially in this genre. And the one thing I like, and you guys know this, I don't like gore. I don't like over the top kind of stuff in that genre. I like more of the suspense and storytelling. And he delivers that in spades in both. It's really, really good filmmaking if you want to check out something creepy this Halloween, but not too creepy.
Perfect. And Bly Manor, I know, is on Netflix. Is Haunting of Hill House also somewhere streaming?
Yeah, both are Netflix exclusives.
Cool. So there you go. Something creepy to check out if you're into that kind of thing. I'm just going to start watching Christmas movies now because let's face it, I just want to get to the end of the year. Let's just get there. Let's just finish it.
Yeah.
I'm rewatching season 1 of The Mandalorian because I'm getting ready for season 2.
Yeah, we are just a little under 2 weeks away from season 2 coming out. And so that's exciting.
I need to rewatch season 1.
Yeah.
It's so good.
And I heard they're going to start production on season 3 this year.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about the way that they make The Mandalorian when they do it in what they call the void, is that what they call it? The void, something.
Yeah, something like that.
The way that they do it there, they can, it's easier for them to do a production like this in the COVID pandemic type world. I don't know why air quoted COVID. COVID's a very real thing, but I just meant like the whole COVID pandemic world, just so we're clear. But yeah, so because of how they do it, it's easier for them to isolate and easier for them to shoot and do production, which is great news for Disney because they've got nothing else going on right now that's going right for them. So that's good. And I'm excited to hear that they're doing season 3. So,
Disney.
Poor Disney. Well, awesome. Well, it is Halloween time. We're not doing anything super scary for our movies this year, but we thought we'd do something a little bit different, a little bit magical.
Hang on.
A little bit. Oh,
Tracy's.
We're on the move. We're on the move.
Trying to find a better Wi-Fi spot.
Okay.
Well, while you're doing that, we're talking about Big today, which is, it's not a scary movie, but it definitely has a little bit of that mystical magic in it, right? I mean, I guess,
Yeah.
I don't know, if you're in the middle of it, it would be scary. Like if that actually happened to you in real life, that would freak you out. But it's not the traditional kind of scary movie. And so I'm excited to talk about this. And then next week we're doing Freaky Friday, and then we've got a couple more, 13 going on 30 and 17 again. So some fun things coming up.
Yeah,
Where
so
it's
they're
a little
all
bit.
those. I was going to
Go
say
ahead.
that they're all just those movies where, this genre has been done before, this story has been done before over and over, where you have somebody changing places with someone else, whether they're changing places with their parent or, they're going to be back to being the younger them again. And I think the movies that we're talking about are how they were done successfully. But there were a lot of movies that had this same genre that did not happen successfully. But I think Big is probably the best storyline of all of them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It just seems to work really well. And I would agree. I think it's the best storyline out of all of them. For sure.
And this is our second Penny Marshall film.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. Yep. And our second Penny Marshall film starring Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
Double points.
They like hanging out with each other.
Well, and they do well together. Sometimes you get a director and an actor combo that they just click. I mean, it's similar to Tim Burton and Johnny Depp. When they get together, it's usually pretty good, and they usually get some good work out of each other.
Yeah.
I do have to say, I've been watching The Weakest Link on Hulu, so it's a day late, and someone was asked a question, and this is relevant. Someone was asked a question about what Academy Award-winning actor has played Walt Disney, Fred Rogers, and Woody. And the lady who answered said Dorothy, because she misheard what the question was, like totally misheard what the question was. And so when we were watching the movie last night, Big, my wife was like, "Oh, is this one of those movies starring Dorothy?" And it was because it was Tom Hanks,
I bet that lady.
Obviously. But
I'm sure that lady feels just awful.
Yeah.
Like,
when she tried to explain her answer, she said, "I heard something about scandal and betrayal, and I knew that there was that new movie about Dorothy, about Judy Garland." I'm like, "Well,
what? You're still wrong, like, lady.
No, sorry." So, but this is one of Dorothy's better movies. I really like Tom Hanks in this one. No, that's not fair to say.
We should go on Twitter and hashtag Dorothy, like Tom Hanks, like all day long today.
Yeah.
Let's start a movement.
See if we can get
his alter ego.
But I really enjoy this one, and this is kind of as he was starting to get to be a bigger name. I mean, I think this is one of his earlier films. It's not, obviously not one of his more recent ones, but this was before he was Academy Award winner, Tom Hanks, and really was kind of breaking in with comedies more than any kind of dramatic role. But this gives us a lot of both. There's a lot of funniness, but there's a lot of drama and a lot of serious acting in it as well. And he does a really great job.
Well, and I think it's one of those movies that,
even
though he's had movies before and after this movie is the one that you still sit down and watch with your kids, even if your kids have never seen it. Like, this movie holds. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, you can watch it, and it does. Like, the humor is still on point. The message is still relevant. I mean, it looks like it was made in the 80s because it was, but that's what you're going to get with the movie that's set in the time that it was made. But it doesn't take you out of it because the story is still so relevant and still so true. So true.
I think looking at this movie and looking at we're going to be talking about Freaky Friday next week, and both of those movies is the older Freaky Friday, the one made in 1976. Like, we'll talk about it next week, but I think comparing Big in 1988 to Freaky Friday in 1976, I could sit down with my daughter and probably, if she ever has a kid, and we could watch Big
Mm-hmm.
and we would still be totally entertained and not brought out of the fact that it was made in the 80s, where is in the Freaky Friday in 1976, like it doesn't hold,
No, it
man.
doesn't.
Like you can totally tell, like there are so many things. We'll get into it next week, but there are so many things that pull me right out of
Mhm.
like being in that movie because of what they put into it. But I think Big, like it's just one of those, yeah, you can kind of tell,
Yeah.
you know, the music is a little of the 80s, the filmmaking is a little of the 80s, but it's so entertaining and the story is so strong and the acting is so strong. But it's so relatable. The relationships in this film are so relatable that it doesn't matter if it's the 80s, 90s, 2000s. The
Mm-hmm.
relationship that he has with his mom, the relationship that he has with his best friend, these are still the kind of relationships we have now. Whereas that Freaky Friday
Yeah.
movie from 1976,
It-
that movie would not be made today.
No, it's painful, and we will definitely get into that next week because wow. But yeah, Big. You could watch it today, and it still holds. And I think there's a lot of really good core messages in there. The idea of, you know, we want to get ahead of where we are. We want to, like, always wanting that next thing, and then getting it all of a sudden without kind of getting there. Like that presents some challenges, and it's hard. But then at the same time, like, I love the line where Susan is talking to the other executive, you know, the bad guy executive, and he's like, "What do you like about Baskin anyway?" And she's like, "He's a grown up," and like, he's a grown up to her because he just doesn't care about all of the adult drama and the politics and the things like that. But he's actually very childlike, and it makes you wonder, like, when we kind of grow up and we want to become the adults and the grown-ups and we get caught up in all of that stuff, are we actually being less grown up? I don't know. It's just it was a weird, just some thoughts I had while I was watching it the other day.
Yeah, I mean, he's the whole time he's like, I don't want to be treated like a baby anymore. I don't want to be treated like a kid. I want to be an adult. And then he gets there, and the woman who becomes his girlfriend, she's like, I don't want to be an adult anymore. So it's like adults are always wishing they could go back and relive their childhood
Mhm.
because being an adult sucks. And kids are like, I don't want to be treated like a kid anymore. And I mean, this is, again, it's the same as Freaky Friday. It's the same as these other movies. But with this film, you actually get to see a kid miss like the total awkward yet amazing years that forms who you are as a person.
Yeah.
He goes from, when you still, had sleepovers with your best friend and you had
Mhm.
secret handshakes. He missed all the years, in between there and being an adult, and that forms you as a person. And so he went straight to it. And so I think, one, that made it great because he's so naive to, you know, how just gross people can be. Like the people at his work, the mean guy at his work is just
Mhm.
like this horrible, manipulative person. And I think we learn that about people in the years that he missed. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
junior high and high school are awful for kids.
Well, yeah, and
But that's when we learn like where we fit in the food chain. But he missed all that. So it's so great because he goes into these meetings like, I don't care. I'll just say I'm a kid. I'm supposed to
Yeah.
just tell you how it is, right? I
Mhm.
don't have a filter,
Right.
and we're, as an adult watching this, I'm like, I wish more adults would actually tell me the truth.
yeah.
But then I'm like, but do I?
Do I really? Yeah. Well,
Do I really?
and at the very end, you've got the scene where he's like, "Yeah, why don't you make a wish and come with me, and we can grow up together?" And she's like, "No, high school, like everything you got ahead of you, like that's hard enough the first time around, if you know what I mean." And then she looks at him, she's like, "Well, I guess you don't know what I mean." And
You
that's
don't
the
know
thing
what-
is he like you said, Val, he's missing out on all of that. Like he doesn't have any idea how hard it is. And I think it would be really, really hard to skip all of that. But at the same time, would we, I don't know, maybe I'd be an executive vice president at a toy making company if I had just
Yeah,
grown up.
because you wouldn't be afraid.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be afraid to just go in and, say what you feel. I think that's sometimes as adults, we get in our own way. Whereas
Yeah,
a
for
kid,
sure.
because we just don't see things the way the world is, like kids can accomplish so much more because they don't have the blocks that we have. I think we get in our own way. And I think that that is kind of a message in this movie too, because they all want to be friends with the owner of this company and they're kissing his butt and they're trying to figure out what he wants, but none of them actually talk to him and or ask him what he wants,
Right.
except for Tom Hanks's character.
Right.
And he's the one that succeeds.
Well, yeah, and there's that disconnect where they're, you know, they're giving him all the reports and the data and the research and everything else, but he runs into Tom Hanks at the toy store playing with toys, and he says, you know, I come here because I want to see what the kids, what they really want and what they're really. He's like, market research can't tell you this, which probably isn't 100% true. Market research does tell you a lot about what people want and kids want, but it's not the same as hands-on, right? And that's where Tom Hanks shines. I love the meeting where they're talking about the transforming skyscraper. And he's like,
but what does it do?
It's a skyscraper. That's awesome.
But what does it do?
It's like, I'm sorry, I don't get it. Like most like Transformers, GoBots, they change into things that are cool that kids want to play with. Like, this is just a building. What do you do with a building? Like,
I want a giant prehistoric bug.
Yeah.
And that guy just loses his crap. I love how
like,
that guy just loses
what is going on?
crap.
Yeah. Well, that guy, it's funny because you notice the immaturity in Tom Hanks in Josh Baskin, because it's very apparent. He is just that childlike naivete, and it's not immaturity in the way like he can't have adult relationships, or he can't in some ways, but it's just that being naive and just childlike. Whereas the other guy, the other executive, he's immature in a totally different way. He is all self-centered and selfish, and you see it really come out when they're playing the racquetball game outside, and he's like, "Oh no, you said it had to go over the line, or hit the line or whatever on the serve, and that one didn't." And he's like, "I never said that." And then they start arguing about it, and he won't give him the ball back, and he's like tackling him to the ground, and like, because he can't stand to lose, and he can't stand to admit that Baskin is better than him in any way. And like, that's a different kind of immaturity. And that guy did go through high school, and he's still that immature,
Right.
So
yeah. But I mean, in that scene where like he finds out that his girlfriend is in to Tom Hanks's character, and he kind of does that thing that kids do when you find out that they've taken your toy. Like when you're an adult, people are your things. And when other people play with your things, with your people, then, you kind of get immature. And I just thought that was like so great, just even in the car, and she's pushing all the buttons because she's realizing like, I have a great life. Like, I'm in this car every day and it has all these things. Like, she's playing with the radio, and like, and that's that saying again, is that kids really allow us to see things that we don't see. We take for granted every day. Kids see those things. And so the story's not like this Oscar award winning like writing, but it works so well because if a kid is going to grow up quickly and going to work anywhere, it's going to be in a toy store. Like, he's going to know like for a toy company, like what's going to work. And so, I mean, that's not like anything huge, but I think it was so brilliant. But there are so many iconic scenes in this movie that whether you have seen this movie or not, you understand what we're talking about. Like the scene you said in the toy store, anybody can watch a clip of him and his boss on that piano, and they're like, oh, okay, that's big. Whether they've seen it once or haven't seen it at all, they understand. If anybody sees the Zoltar machine, they understand what it means, what movie it's from. There's just so many iconic moments in this film. I think my favorite one is when he shows up to the executive party and he's eating the little corns. Like, and it's just throwing them away. When I was a kid and I saw that, I was like, so then I would do that every time I would see those. I'd be like,
well, and that leads into it, when he's there and she offers to give him a ride home, and this is where she's interested in him now, and she wants to she kind of has this history of getting with these top executives at the company, and so he's the next target for her. And so she's like, when she's like, "Oh, do you want me to, stay the night?" He's like a sleepover,
Sleepover?
like yeah,
He's
like a
like,
sleepover. And in his mind, he's picturing like, yeah, that's great. He takes her up, like, hey, let's jump on the trampoline. She's like, you want me to jump on the trampoline for you? And you can tell she's thinking this is some kind of weird like fetish of
you can
his.
sleep on the top. You can
Women.
sleep on the top bunk.
Yeah, he's like, I get top, and she was like, of course, and like has no idea that he actually means a bunk.
Yeah.
Like, and then when she's like, okay, I'll jump for you, and you can tell she's thinking this is some kind of weird thing that he's got, but no, he really just wants to have fun and jump on the trampoline with her. That's when she starts to realize, okay, he is different, and it's a good different for her. So,
Yeah. So
I love the scene when he sits down for the first time at his computer at work, and John Lovitz is his neighbor. Anytime John Lovitz is in a movie, it's great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he leans over. He's like, see her over there? Yeah, she's, whatever. She'll wrap her legs around you so tight and never let you go or whatever. He's like, oh, I'm going to stay away from her.
Well, and Tom Hanks just has that sense of, I don't think it would have worked with a different actor. The whole movie is so heavily based on him and his ability to access that childhood wonder and excitement and innocence. And yeah, I mean, the way he delivers that line, Jake, is just so great because of the performance.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about the elephant in the room as well? And I don't know if I'm the only one that realized it this time around watching it, but I feel like Tiger King has ruined the Baskin name, because all I could think about,
I didn't even think of that.
As soon as they say Mrs. Baskin, I'm like, oh, they have the same last name, because I didn't remember their family last name, and Carol Baskin and now Mrs. Baskin, and that's all I could think about, like, for the first half of the movie. And I was like, I think there should be like some kind of ordinance that if your movie is in a feel-good Tom Hanks movie and you're not a good person, you must change your name.
I will support that.
That gets increasingly harder because he's been in a lot of movies, and most of them help.
Well, then be a good person.
Exactly. Yeah. It's up to you to be a good person.
I did not make that connection at all. So
I didn't either. But props to you for doing so. Now I'll just never see this movie in the same light again.
I'm sorry. I ruined it for everyone.
No, I think you're right, Tracy, when you talk about Tom Hanks. He does have an ability, not just a childlike wonder, but I think anytime he's cast in a role, he just becomes that character so well. I mean, there's few people out there that could be trusted to play both Walt Disney and Fred Rogers, and he does both of those roles really well. He does, in The Terminal, for example, which is not like the greatest movie, but he does a really good job.
That movie.
He just, whatever role he steps into, he just is such an incredible performer and actor that he just takes that role on. So it's like, there's few actors that you go to and say, okay, we want you to play like a guy who looks like he's grown up, but he's really a 13-year-old. Okay, cool. Got it. And he's ready to go. Like, I don't know that there's a lot of actors that could step into that role as well. And I agree. It just wouldn't be the same movie if it wasn't Tom Hanks. And it makes you wonder who else they had in mind. Cause he wasn't a big enough name at the time that they could be like, no, this role was written for him.
It's gotta be Tom Hanks. Yeah.
Yeah. I would be interested to know who else.
Yeah, I just don't see. Yeah, because the people that were big, the people that were like bigger actors at the time, when you look at that time period in late 1980s, they were all doing movies that were like mafia movies and serious movies, and there wasn't really a ton of huge comedies happening, and so I mean, like, you wouldn't want like Al Pacino to be in this role. You wouldn't want, that's crazy.
So here's what's really funny. You just mentioned Al Pacino. I just found on imdb.com, it says Tom Hanks was the first choice to play Josh Baskin, but was unavailable due to scheduling conflicts with Dragnet and Punchline. Robert De Niro was then offered the lead role, but was rejected because the $2 million salary demand was too high. Robert De Niro as Josh Baskin in Big.
And not just that, it's a 1987 Robert De Niro. This is
I can't see
Goodfellas
that at all.
This is Martin Scorsese De Niro. This isn't War with Grandpa silly comedy De Niro.
Yeah. I mean, the same movies that came out this year were like Cocktail, Mystic Pizza, Roger Rabbit. I mean, okay, so what if Tom Hanks was in Willow and Val Kilmer was in Big? Because those came out the same year.
Oh, wow.
Willow might have been better, but Big would not have been.
No, I think Val Kilmer, I like him in Willow. I really do. I think he fits, but I don't think, him in Big would have been a good idea. You know, and also we had Beetlejuice that year, and you know, I wouldn't want Michael Keaton in that role either. I mean, that wouldn't have worked out. But I think with Tom Hanks, he had been working on a bunch of things, but I think what he had going for him is that he is such a tall man that's a good actor. But when you look at him and you think, oh my gosh, who is this big tall man? You automatically think of an adult, and then he talks and he makes his faces, and he's immediately, like Tracy said, like this young kid. You don't get that combination. Like Robert De Niro can be silly, but you look at him, and whether he's laughing or not, I'm a little scared of Robert De Niro. Like I don't care if it's 1988 Robert De Niro or 2020 Robert De Niro, and he's laughing and making jokes. I'm still like,
even in the comedies that he's been in, the silly comedies that he's been in recently, like, War with Grandpa, I haven't seen it yet, but it feels like it's in the same vein as like Meet the Parents. Like he's funny in it, but he's still also really scary. Like that's what's funny about it. Like, I've got nipples, can you milk me? Like that's just a really intimidating line. Like, and it's silly and ridiculous, but when Robert De Niro says it, you're like, no, sir.
Yeah, I think not. The only movie that he does that I don't see the Robert De Niro that's in every movie, and I think Robert De Niro is a great actor. He is one of my favorites. But he is in a movie called The Intern, which not a lot of people have seen. It's one of my favorite movies. And I absolutely love him in that. And he plays a character, and I mean, he is this character that I would hug Robert De Niro and not feel like he was going to kill me or have someone else kill me, would be in The Intern. Yeah. Would I still want him in Big? No, I still don't think he would be great in Big. But I mean, there's just moments when, they show, younger Baskin, and he's with his friend and they're doing Down, Down, Baby, down by the roller coaster, like that whole thing. And then when he does it again with Shimmy, Shimmy, Rock, Shimmy, Shimmy, Cocoa Puff. Yeah, I know the whole thing. I love it. But when Tom does it with the kid when he's older, you see the same energy from him that you see from the child actor. Like there's something so magical there that I just don't see another actor being able to do that.
Yeah. I did read that they would have the young Josh actually play the adult role, and Tom Hanks would watch him and study his mannerisms and how he reacted, and then transferred over. They said he did something similar with Forrest Gump.
Okay.
Interesting. So, and I was, while you were talking, Jake, on IMDb, I quickly browsed, and John Travolta was Penny Marshall's first choice, but he was considered box office poison.
Yeah. Also would have a hard time with that.
That would be really different movie too.
I think the problem with John Travolta in the 80s and Val Kilmer in the 80s for this role is they're just too good looking. Like they are the lead male hero, good looking kind of actors. And Tom Hanks, who's an incredible actor, is, and it's not that he's ugly. I just want this to be clear, but he's not that.
No,
that
he's not the typical
good looking
man.
He doesn't have the machismo. They have this machismo, like Tom. Like I, when you watch Grease, you just know without him saying anything that he is the big guy on campus. Like this is he just has this certain thing about him that in every movie that he's in, I watched Face Off the other night and I hadn't watched it in such a long time. And there's just, regardless of the age of him, he has this machismo about him that's so,
Mhm.
it's not like cheesy, it's great, but I just don't see him like he's been childlike in Michael, but he was still sexy Michael. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
he's the sexiest angel I've ever seen.
Well, and to me,
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but to me, watching Tom Hanks' performance in this, you feel like he actually is this kid trapped in this adult body, and you completely buy it. Whereas, like you were saying, Val, if you have Val Kilmer or Robert De Niro, I don't know if you instantly see, like maybe through the acting you would get it, but there's an instant connection with Tom Hanks, where you're just like, okay, he's a 10-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I do want to just say about Face Off really quick. That's one of my favorite titles for any movie ever, because I feel like they're like, okay, we've got this idea. We're going to take these two crime lords. We're going to cut their faces off and swap them. And what should we call it? Face Off.
It works on
Perfect.
multiple levels.
It does.
Why have we not talked about this movie, by the way? Can we add that,
I'm down.
that to our
I'm
list?
down for adding a John Woo film. But see, they're getting their faces cut off, but they're also going against each other in a face-off.
John Woo is my favorite action director, and yeah. No, this movie was the first movie that in film school I got to participate in before they cut the film, and we met John Woo and we met the writers, directors, and it was a big deal for me, this film, and so it has like a special little USC memories in my heart. Plus, I just love John Woo. Like, he's great.
There you go. Boy, the only director I got to meet was Danny Boyle. Who's great, but he's not John Woo.
I mean, that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, but he's not John Woo.
John Woo's great. Like, yeah, when we talk about it, I'll tell you guys my John Woo story. Like, it's pretty magical. So,
all right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Is it as magical as the Jack Black story?
It's a little, I mean, I would think it's equally as magical.
Oh, I'm very
because
excited.
I didn't expect to meet Jack Black, but I knew I was going in to meet John Woo. So
I'm
it is a
intrigued.
little, and John Woo, like, yeah, it was a class. We had a class with John Woo.
Right.
So yeah.
Ooh, that's cool. I'm excited.
Cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So speaking of the child actors in Big, we've got his best friend, Billy Kopecki, who
I love him so much.
who is like, he's like the sidekick child actor of his era, because he's in this. He's also in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. He just shows up from time to time, and he's got a very recognizable face and mannerism, and he just plays this kind of sarcastic sidekick very, very well. And I think he's great in this movie, playing opposite of Tom Hanks and being comfortable, like making it look believable that these two are still best friends, even though one of them is a grown man and one of them is a child. Although I think nowadays, if you saw a grown man hanging out with a child who was clearly not his son, you'd probably call the police as much as these guys hung out. But,
hey, there's still the Big Brother program. Don't jump to conclusions.
That's true. That's true. That's a fair point.
I live in the happy half glass full kind of world, but yeah, I mean, I would definitely question it, but I would hope for the best.
Yeah. But I do love it what he's doing.
But yeah, I definitely think. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, go. You had a thought.
No, you go.
I mean, I love it when they're in the scene where they're at the job interview and he's filling out the application and they're like, okay, you can come in now, Mr. Baskin, but your son's going to have to wait out here. They're like, my son? It's like, okay, Dad, I'm going to wait out here, Dad. And like makes it all awkward. I'm like, you guys are idiots, because it totally would have been like, okay, like you're playing it like it's such a weird jump to conclusions.
Right.
Well, and I just love that you can tell that they're best friends because like he believed him almost right away and he had no question about the story. You know what I mean? Like he's telling him, no, it's me. Here's a couple of things. And there was no question in his mind that would be his best friend. Like he knew it. And I just thought that was so great because, when you're a kid, most of us have these connections with at least one person, whether you're still friends with that person or not now, you remember like your best friend, and would they have really thought that was you, and would they have helped you? Like, he went out of his way. Like, they went and got this seedy, motel room that's awful. Like, I would not have laid on that mattress. Like, they needed tetanus shots and penicillin and everything after that. But like, he really did, like, help him out. Like, that he didn't just say, okay, well, it's your problem. He was his best friend, no matter what. My boyfriend and I watched The Boys last night, and I had watched Big earlier in the day. And if you haven't seen, or no, it was, what was it? Good Boys, not The Boys. That's a totally different movie. But Good Boys, the movie, and they also have this like relationship with each other that they're just like, no matter what they're getting into, they're totally, following along. And I think after watching Big yesterday morning and then watching that show last night, I was like, boys are really nice to each other when they're younger. Like, they just stick next to each other. And no questions asked.
Yeah.
I'd like to say that's a stereotype, but no, it's actually pretty true for the most part. You're like,
well, and Val, going back to what you were talking about, I think that the reason why Josh's friend is able to accept the idea that he made a wish and it came true and now he's big, it's easier for a kid to, okay, that makes sense. Whereas when he's trying to tell his mom and he's trying to tell his girlfriend, and they just can't wrap their heads around it because that's just so implausible. But to the 12-year-old, it's like, okay, I get it. We sang a rap song that we know, and then we're good. We're best friends. So let's go.
Yeah. And when and the scene with his mom where he's trying to tell her and trying to let her know what happened, and he is terrified because he doesn't know what to do,
right?
And he's freaking out. And he's, I made this for you, Mom. And I, trying to share all the stuff that only she would know. She's like, what have you done with, like, she can't even begin to go there because, like you were saying, Tracy, she just can't even wrap her head around it. And, she's convinced that Josh has been kidnapped, and she offers to give the guy her purse. And he's like, no, I don't want, listen to me, Mom, it's me. And I love that this movie, it is so typical for its time in that it just ends, right? He just walks in and it's like, Josh, you're home, and that's it. And you don't get any of the like after effects or anything like that. Like, there's not going to be a sequel, Big 2, where it's like him going to therapy and the therapist trying to convince him that it didn't actually happen, that like this is how he's coping with a very traumatic experience of being kidnapped, and like he's made up this whole story.
There's not going to be like, a return to Oz where they put him in a.
No one should ever get that kind of treatment for their sequel. A Return to Oz treatment is just.
But it's kind of the same thing. Like they're going to put him in this insane asylum or in this therapist that try and shock it out of him that this didn't happen to him. I mean, thank goodness. I don't want a Big 2 ever. Like, anybody, I'm sure people have tried to pitch it. And hopefully those people don't have jobs anymore.
Like it's it. Look, what happened to Josh after Big? Like, nobody cares. You're missing the point of the movie. Like, nobody cared at all.
We don't want to know.
Well, like, the other thing,
what happened, he walked in and Mom and Dad were so happy to see him, and then he had a normal, healthy life from the time he was 13 until he, grew old and retired, and everything went great for him. That's what happened to Josh. That's what we need to know.
The other thing I noticed too, and this is talking about the time period, it's only like an hour and 45 minutes. And that includes
it's perfect.
I mean,
it's perfect.
It's a tight little thing. And so many movies now feel like they have to be at least 2 to 2.5 hours minimum.
Yeah.
And it's an hour and 45 minutes and a lot happens.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the thing. A lot of these movies that are so much longer now, and you talked about being tight, it's so true. A lot of these movies are so much longer now, and there's moments where you're like, couldn't we have left this out? Like, nothing is really happening right now.
I feel like at the time they said, okay, like America's attention span is an hour and a half to an hour and 40 minutes. So you've got to really be able to tell your story. And there is an art form. Like, when you first go to film school, they make you tell a 6 to 8 minute film. Like, you better get your thoughts down, and you better really, word economize. That's what we use in the morning show, is like, okay, you've got a 10-minute story, but you've got to tell it in 2 minutes. When we tell people, when we call them on the radio, like, tell us like your phone is going to die. Tell us your story like your phone is going to die. And I feel like now people are like, oh, they did a 2.5 hour, 3 hour movie. That's so artistic. That's so like they're almost giving them permission to suck. Because I mean, how many times, guys, how many times last year when we actually went to movies did we walk out of the film and I'm like, okay, they could have cut 30 minutes out of this film?
Yeah, most
And
of
you're
them.
Like
absolutely
because
right.
they're allowed to ramble now, and I'm so over the rambling. I love when you have, like Tracy, like you said, a super tight, minute or hour 45 movie that you get all the story that you need, and there's nothing else that
Mhm.
I don't need any of your side gibberish.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
tell
Yep.
me a movie like your phone is gonna die.
yeah, one of
I
the
feel like
first things
Give
we
me like
one of
tell
the
me
first
that
things we
story.
learned in film school up at the U was 99% of movies are too long.
Yep.
And it was like you cut like your life depends on it. Like you edit this thing down to the bone, and that's what you do.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just don't see that as much anymore.
No, you don't. I blame James Cameron because
I
I
was going to
feel,
say
and I'll
George
tell you
Lucas,
why.
but
What's that?
I was going to say Lucas, but Cameron works.
Well, and the reason why is because I feel like Titanic was where that trend started to change. And Titanic, it was a longer movie, but it was one of the first longer movies that mainstream wise people went back and saw over and over
Yeah.
again. And studios saw we could make these longer movies, and directors got a little bit more leeway to do it.
But I
I
think
feel like
that
after
movie
that,
wasn't self-centered though. Like I can watch Titanic over and over and watch just the technical aspects of that
sure,
movie, and I don't think it feels long. Whereas if you go and watch something like
The Irishman.
Tenant, and the Irishman is so self-centered. There
Holy
is so much
cow.
stuff in that movie that does not need to be there. So I think
Mhm.
there's a difference between doing a 3 hour movie that has a story that is moving you forward and a 3 hour movie. And I think Tarantino is a little bit
Mhm.
guilty of this as
Mhm.
well. If he doesn't have his editor there to cut out his ego, then you get at least 25 to 30 minutes of his ego in his
yeah.
movies.
100%.
Well,
100%.
and I don't mean to say that
Yeah.
Titanic is a bad movie. I just think, and I don't
No, I get what you're saying.
but I think there's that kind of opened that door. It seems like the trend started going
Makes
upward
sense.
from
Sure.
then. And from Lord of the Rings too, I think is another. You
That
want
was
to
a big
blame
Yeah.
turning
someone else.
point.
Peter Jackson is another one to blame.
Yeah.
But
But
again, Lord of the Rings doesn't feel like it's that long for people that enjoy Lord of the Rings. For people that don't, it feels like it's forever. And I get it. But
Yeah.
But it's interesting
It could be
because I felt
torture.
like The
It could be
Hobbit,
torture for some people.
yes,
but I
exactly.
felt like the Hobbit films took forever, whereas the
Okay.
Lord of the Rings, it just clips by.
Well, that's because Lord of the Rings is 3 books this size, while The Hobbit is 1 book this size that they stretched into 3 movies that were as long as the Lord of the Rings movies. It shouldn't have never happened. It shouldn't have ever happened that way. But
And
But
just to
that's
let
not
you
Peter
guys
Jackson's
know,
fault.
they're doing all 6 of the movies in 4K digital DVD coming out, so you can get
yeah,
all of the torture again if you haven't already bought the box set or if you want every
Uh,
box set ever made. But they're also doing the director's cut. So if you really want to torture someone that doesn't like it, then go ahead and buy those and watch them.
I like the director's cuts even better on those films. Not always, but on those films, yes.
yeah. Yeah.
But going back to Big with
Yes.
the editing,
It's
though,
probably a good
even though
idea.
it's a shorter, tighter movie, it still has a leisurely pace to it. I don't feel
Right.
like there's the frenetic storytelling, which was a really cool change of pace because I still got this kind of moving along, feel good, leisurely paced film, but then it was over.
Yeah. I agree. It tells the story it needs to tell in the time that it tells it. And you start at point A and you get to point B and you've gone on a journey, even though that journey took less time than other movies. And I think that that's really great storytelling on the part of Penny Marshall, on the part of the screenwriters, on everybody involved. But I also think that that's, like you said, Tracy, that's the time. A lot of movies were 2 hours or less in the 80s and the early 90s. And I wish we would go back to that because we don't need 2 hours plus to tell a comedic story anymore.
Yeah,
just
if the
I
story
think
warrants
another
it.
yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say if the story warrants it, then I don't have a problem with a 2.5, 3 hour movie. But if you're trying to tell like Val said, if you're trying to tell an hour and a half movie into 3 hours, you're doing it absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a really good version of that is Endgame. I mean, Endgame is 3 hours of, and by the time it was done, I was like, but I need more. Like, I can't
Yeah.
believe it's over.
Right.
Like the
Right.
pacing of that film, how much story they filled in that film, but also they had their quiet, slow moments. That was a really good paced 3 hour movie. But I think another good version of Big is even a year later, Tom Hanks was in The Burbs. It was the same thing. It was this really great, movie that was only an hour 42. And, it was kind of a darker comedy, but they fit such a good story in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
I agree. All right, guys. Well, what do we want to give for a grade for Big?
Al?
I think Big is a solid B plus for me. I mean, I can watch this movie over and over and over. It's not my absolute favorite Tom Hanks movie, but it's like in the top 5 of my favorite Tom Hanks movies.
Yeah, I'd probably go B plus as well on this one. Tom Hanks absolutely is magnificent in the film. The rest of the casting is really good. I like the child actors, which is not always a good that's a difficult thing, but the kids worked really well for me. It does kind of show its age, but it still holds up really well. So I'm going to give it a B plus.
I'm going to give it an A for myself. I remember watching it as a kid and fantasizing about what it would be like to be a grown up and how cool that is that he had an opportunity to do that. And now I watch it as a grown up and I get very different messages out of it. And a movie that can do that for me is awesome. It's got great rewatchability for me. So I would give it an A. So
nice.
All right. Well, awesome, guys. We next week we'll be back with Freaky Friday. We're going to be talking about the original 1976 Freaky Friday as well as the remake in 2003. We are not going to be covering the one that came out in 2018 on the Disney Channel because none of us have seen it, nor do we want to. So
two versions of Freaky Friday was my limit. I couldn't do 3.
Yeah, there is a new version of Freaky Friday. It's called just Freaky. And I don't know that it's actually Freaky Friday, but it's the same kind of story. But it's a horror version of the film where the teenage girl switches with the Butterfield Butcher. And Vince Vaughn is playing the teenage girl in the Butterfield Butcher's body.
And
I heard it's great. I heard it's good. I heard it's
really surprisingly good. And I'm kind of intrigued by that one.
Yeah, it looks incredibly gory, though, from the trailers. But, however, there you go. There's a tie-in for Halloween with Freaky Friday and Freaky. Perfect.
Can you imagine the pitch meeting for that? Okay, we're going to take the beloved Disney classic Freaky Friday and put it into a horror film.
Depending on what
some girl has to be Vince Vaughn.
Yeah,
I mean, that's freaky enough.
Depending on what studio you're pitching to, that's all they had to say. We want to take the Disney classic Freaky Friday and turn it into a horror film. Sold. Let's do it.
You got a green light picture.
Yeah, we don't even care. We don't need to see the script. You're good to go. Also, speaking of Halloween, you guys listeners, you need to check out Val's Multiplane podcast. They're doing a countdown to Halloween this month. And so you go over and check out their videos on their Facebook page for some great suggestions on what's available for Halloween from Disney, because you guys cover all things Disney.
Yeah, we cover all things Disney. And on the 29th, we are going to have Paul Draper live on the show at 3:30. And we are going to be talking about Haunted Mansion, both the movie and the ride. And he's a fantastic magician, but he also has some really fun insight about the Haunted Mansion ride. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, Paul Draper is an amazing human being. That'll be a fun episode.
I'm looking forward to that one.
So awesome. In the meantime, though, you can send us your feedback to podcast@moviesthatmakeus.com. You can also leave your comments here at the bottom or under our video. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do that. Like this video, set the alert so you know when we've got new videos up, and share it with your friends. And in the meantime, we won't see you at the movies. Bye.